Okay, today I am going to be discussing the 11th and 12th grade suggested summer reading list with you, and I will be using a Prezi presentation, of course. Okay, so the first book that we're going to talk about today is Winter Girls by Lori Halse Anderson. It is the story of a girl named Leah. Leah has been hospitalized twice for anorexia and cutting herself, and any progress she's made towards normalcy is destroyed when her ex-best friend Cassie dies alone in a hotel room of a burst esophagus, which was the result of violent bulimia. Leah is devastated by the 33 messages Cassie left on her phone, none of which Leah listened to until it was obviously too late. As Leah completely spirals into another period of self-destruction, her parents that are divorced, they don't even notice that she's going through all of this. But Leah's love for her stepsister is really the only thing giving her the will to fight all of these self-destructive urges. The stream of consciousness first-person narration of this book really illustrates that, an anorexic mentality. Still visible crossed out words and phrases show the disconnect between Leah's anorexic voice and her healthy reasoning. As Leah struggles to fight her disease, Cassie continually haunts her, enticing her to join her in the land of the Winter Girls. And that, again, is Winter Girls by Lori Halse Anderson. Okay, our next novel is Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. It is the story of a man named Jacob Jankowski. You get really two narratives. You get the older narrator, Jacob, when he is in his 90s in a nursing home, and then you get the young man Jacob during the Great Depression. So, you know, Jacob, when he was a young man, found himself very down on his luck. He had to quit veterinary school. He joins the Benzini brothers' most spectacular show on earth, which is a big circus, a traveling circus show. And it really has, irrational rules, like very narrow rules, and a really different way of life, which is, you know, very, very different from the world that he grew up in. But he meets the star of the Equestrian Act, whose name is Marlena, and he falls in love with her. But of course, Marlena's boyfriend is the boss of the entire circus. And so you really see, their adventures and what happens to them in Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. Okay, our next book is called The Kitchen House, which is by Kathleen Grissom. This book is about a girl. When a white servant girl violates the order of plantation society, she unleashes a tragedy that exposes the worst and best in the people she has come to call her family. Orphaned while on board a ship from Ireland, her parents died on the ship. 7-year-old Lavinia arrives on the steps of a tobacco plantation where she is to live and work with the slaves of the kitchen house. Under the care of Belle, the master's illegitimate daughter, Lavinia becomes deeply bonded to this adopted, slave family, though she's set apart from them by, the fact that she's white. Eventually, Lavinia is accepted into the world of the big house, where the master is absent and the mistress battles opium addiction. Lavinia finds herself, straddling two very, very different worlds. When she's forced to make a choice between the kitchen house world and the big house world, loyalties are brought into question, and dangerous truths are laid bare, and lives are really put at risk. Very, very powerful novel, and that's The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grissom. Okay, this is a YouTube video. It's supposed to be Mexicans, Venus. Nobody was supposed to be here. Whoa, let's go! It's supposed to be fun. Everybody knows. I love him. I love Jimmy. He's never said that to me, has he? Nobody's talking. I can't lie. You have to. Jimmy, I love you. Nobody was supposed to be hurt. Okay, so that is Lie by, Catherine Bach. And she's actually a Long Island author, and it's about a girl named Skylar who's questioned by the police because her boyfriend is accused of brutally assaulting two young El Salvadorian immigrants. And so lie is actually for LIE, as in our LIE. It's a Long Island story. It's based on real events. And it's, again, very powerful young adult novel. Okay. The next novel that we'll be speaking of is Life of Pi by Yann Martel. And this book is, it's a very original novel. It's a story of a young castaway named Pi, who faces immeasurable hardships on the high seas, and a meditation on religion, faith, art, and life that is as witty as it is profound. Using threads of all of our best stories, Yann Martel has woven a glorious spiritual adventure that makes us question what it means to be alive and to believe. And that's Life of Pi by Yann Martel. Okay, this is our next. Okay, and that is What Happened to Goodbye by Sarah Dessen. The actual cover of the book is not all, 1970s looking like that. So, because it wasn't written then, it was written recently. Okay, and now we go on to the nonfiction portion of my presentation here. And this is And Still Peace Did Not Come, a memoir of reconciliation, and that's by Agnes Fala Kamara Umana with Emily Holland. And this is, sorry, looking at my work here. This is when, about, Agnes Kamara Umana's home. When bullets hit her home in Liberia, she and her father piled whatever they could, carry into their car and drove towards the border, along with thousands of other people. An army of children was approaching under the leadership of Charles Taylor, and it really did, for her, seem like the end of the world. They finally made it to Sierra Leone. They were lucky. They did live in exile for years. The fighting finally seemed over. Agnes was able to return to Liberia, which was completely devastated by years of civil war. Families were torn apart, villages were destroyed, and it seems like no one was really spared. And so, really unsure of what to do in a place that was so different from the home of her memories, Agnes accepted a job at the local UN-run radio station, and their mission is peace, and their method is reconciliation through the understanding and communication through the radio. So soon she came up with a plan to find the former child soldiers and record their stories. And so Agnes, who at the time was a 43 single mother, headed out to the ghettos of Monrovia and befriended them and, and earned their trust. And one by one, they spoke to her about, what it was like to be a child soldier and the stories that she found. And so that is And Still Peace Did Not Come, a memoir of reconciliation. If you liked A Long Way Gone about the child soldiers, this might be something that interests you. Okay, our next nonfiction is Between a Rock and a Hard Place. This was a huge bestseller. It was also made into the film 127 Hours, which had James Franco in it. But don't watch the film, read the book. So hiking into the remote Utah Canyonlands, Aaron Ralston felt perfectly at home in the beauty of this natural world. And then at 2:41 p.m., 8 miles from his truck, in a deep and narrow slot canyon, an 800-pound boulder tumbled loose, pinning Aaron's right hand and wrist against the canyon wall. Through 6 days of hell with scant water, food, or warm clothing, and the terrible knowledge that no one knew where he was, Aaron eliminated his escape option one by one. Then a moment of stark clarity helped him to solve the riddle of the boulder and commit one of the most extreme and desperate acts imaginable. A very honest book, inspiring, astonishing, really. And this is Between a Rock and a Hard Place, has taken the place in really classic adventure stories. And again, since it is a true story, it's really quite an amazing memoir. And that's Between a Rock and a Hard Place by Aaron Ralston. And my last book that we're going to talk about today is the Steve Jobs biography. This was, published right after his passing. It was supposed to be published way after, but it was published right after, and it's based on more than 40 interviews with Jobs that were conducted over about 2 years by some, hundreds of family members, friends, adversaries, competitors, colleagues, all of these interviews. He writes this really riveting story of this roller coaster life and, very intense personality of this extremely creative man whose passion for perfection and ferocious drive revolutionized 6 industries: PCs, animated movies, music, phones, tablet computing, and digital publishing. The interesting thing is that Jobs cooperated with this book, but he never asked for control. He never asked to read the finished copy. Apparently, he's just very, very honest. Nothing was put off limits. And people who have read this novel have really said that it's not novel, it's not, it's a biography, have said that it's quite amazingly written. And again, so if you're into, that technology world, Steve Jobs may be the book for you. So this concludes my presentation for today. So happy summer reading.